everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing my February wrap-up. So February was a pretty great reading month for me. I read a total of 9 books, and I basically went on this adult romance bender. It was absolutely wonderful. I read some books that I really enjoyed, but I also read some books that turned out to be pretty disappointing. So without further ado, we are gonna hop right on into it. So the first book I picked up was The Friend Zone by Abby Jimenez. At the start of the month, I jumped on the Libby app and I just wanted to see what adult romances were immediately available. This one was available, and it also was very hyped over on Goodreads, so I thought, I'm just gonna go for it. This is a dual perspective novel. We are following Kristen and Josh. Kristen is this kind of no-nonsense entrepreneur. She's definitely stubborn at times, but she's got a lot of moxie to her. She gets selected to be the maid of honor at her best friend's wedding, and while planning the wedding, she has to meet and team up with the groom's best man named Josh. And Josh is totally great. Josh is totally funny. He's a firefighter. He's got a rockin' body. But Josh also really wants a large family. In fact, I think he dreams of like literally having 19 kids and counting. The big conflict at the center of this novel, and it's not a spoiler, this is in the synopsis, is that Kristen is struggling with infertility. And so she's caught in this hard place where she's not sure if she should pursue a relationship with Josh, knowing all that he wants, or if she should just cut ties with him immediately. There's a lot of banter between them and bickering, but they are physically attracted to each other pretty much off the bat. What I do like about this novel is that the chemistry is definitely there. I feel like these two people are definitely meant to be together. There's also a lot of twists and turns to this novel. There is a particularly large twist at the end. If you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about, that I still don't know how I feel about entirely. Also, in the end, people have a lot of issues with how the subject of infertility was handled. The topic of infertility is just something we haven't seen in adult romances too often, and so I think a lot of people were excited to see this issue center stage. Some people thought it was handled appropriately, and other people were a little disappointed. For me personally, that really wasn't my issue for me at all. It was more so how Josh and Kristen end up together in the end, and sort of the inner monologue that was going through Josh's head about how he's going to lock Kristen down. I just remember reading the audiobook and being like, ooh. That was just my personal issue, but overall this was a really fun read about 2/3 of the way in. So I gave it a 3.5 star rating. So the next 3 adult romance novels that I picked up were all by Christina Lauren. Now I, up until that point, had never read anything by this author duo, but I know that they are such large forces in the adult romance genre, especially here on BookTube. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna go in full force, hop back on the Libby app, and Roomies happened to be immediately available. So I checked that one out first. And this is basically a story about a marriage of convenience. We are following a girl named Holland. She lives in New York City. She has gone to school for writing and she dreams of being a famous author one day, but she just really hasn't written in a while. I think it's been months, if not years. And she spends most of her days working for one of her uncles, who is a musical director on Broadway. And kind of the only thing that Holland really looks forward to in her life these days is trips to the subway station, where a street musician named Calvin plays on a regular basis. He is a fantastic musician, but she's also very physically attracted to him as well. And at the beginning of the novel, Calvin does a huge favor for Holland, so she wants to pay him back by slipping his name to her uncle who works on Broadway. And they end up auditioning Calvin, and it goes really well, and they love him, and they want to cast him in this big Broadway show. But it's quickly revealed that Calvin is actually in the United States illegally. He was here on a student visa, but it expired about 6 years ago, and it's a whole issue. So our brave heroine Holland decides to bite the bullet and marry Calvin so that he can continue working in the United States. And like I said, it's a marriage of convenience. They are pretending to be married, pretending to be in love, until they're not pretending any longer. So there was nothing objectively wrong with this book. I just kind of found it to be boring. I didn't really connect with any of the characters. I didn't find Holland to be particularly interesting, nor did I find Calvin to be this swoon-worthy male love interest. Maybe he's just not my type, but I just didn't really care about their romance whatsoever. I think the musical director uncle was the character that I cared about the most. which is really saying something. So overall, it was an okay book, but it's just not memorable whatsoever, and I ended up giving it 3 stars. The second book I picked up by Christina Lauren was Love and Other Words. I was very disappointed about this one because going into it, I know this book was so well received by so many booktubers that I follow here in the community, but even over on Goodreads, you can tell that this book is one of the strongest books within the author duo's repertoire. So the book is basically a dual timeline. We are bouncing back and forth between now and then, and we are following this couple, Macy and Elliot, who were childhood best friends and they were each other's first loves. But some string of events, something happens that we aren't told about in the beginning of the novel that sets them apart, and for 10 years they have no form of communication, and by happen chance they run into each other a decade later, and the story is all about them trying to piece back the romance that they had and trying to start a part 2 of their relationship. I'm pretty sure that this is the softest, most heartwarming, emotional adult romance novel that I have personally ever read. It is equal parts heartwarming as it is heartbreaking. We know right off the bat that Macy has had a very difficult childhood. She has lost a lot of family members from the get-go, but her and Elliot have found sanctuary through reading books and sharing books together and basically hiding out in this makeshift closet library in Macy's family home. There was one point at the end where I actually felt a little weepy-eyed as I was listening to the audiobook and driving in my car to school. But that being said, up until that ending, I just kind of found the book to be boring, and I just did not really care and was just not invested in the couple whatsoever. And I will say, I think it's because I listened to the audiobook that my rating is as low as it is. I think if I had taken the time to really savor this story and slowly read it and slowly digest it, I think I would have had a much better experience. So I would still recommend this book if you are looking for something very sensitive and emotional and just heart-wrenching. I would definitely recommend this book for you still. It's just my personal experience with it was kind of lukewarm, and I ended up giving it a 3.5 star rating. And then the final Christina Lauren book that I read was probably the most disappointing of the 3, and that was just because I was anticipating it so much. Now granted, this is all relative. I ended up rating the book a 3 to 3.5 star rating, somewhere around there, but I just had such high expectations for it, and that was The Unhoneymooners. So in this book, we are following Olive, and she is just this perpetually unlucky person, as opposed to her twin sister Amy, who is constantly winning things. She's winning sweepstakes, she's winning competitions, she's always winning these super hot guys, and Olive just kind of lags behind her. And it's really quite a surprise when something happens at Amy's wedding that basically Amy is no longer able to attend her own honeymoon. So Olive needs to travel to Hawaii and go enjoy her sister's honeymoon with the groom's brother named Ethan, and Olive cannot stand Ethan. So this is basically a story of enemies to lovers. The two of them go to Hawaii, they can't stand each other at first, and then they end up falling in love. If I could use 2 words to describe this book, it would be funny and saucy. There are definitely some scenes that made me laugh. I love the banter between Olive and Ethan, and I think Olive and Amy's family as an entire unit is probably my favorite character in this book. On the other hand, by the end of this book, the plot just absolutely lost me, and I really just stopped caring, and I was not invested in the main couple whatsoever. Okay, and I think the main reasoning behind this is because this was like the 4th adult romance novel I had read back to back to back, and I was starting to see a formula in the plot. Basically, there is the big underlying conflict that the couple first has to work through, and then about 75% of the way in, the couple either ends up together or they're on the verge of ending up together, and then there is this just complete, wild, unrelated plot twist about 50 pages out from the ending that the couple has to work through, and then they live happily ever after, which is a totally fine formula, totally fine plot structure when I read it the first time around, but I was on like book 4 at this point, and that formula was just standing out to me so much, and I think I was just getting really burnt out on it. So I think that played a huge role in why I rated this book as low as I did. But like I said, objectively, it was a great adult romance novel. I would still recommend it to people. And like I said, I gave this a 3 to 3.5 star rating. Okay, so finally moving out of the adult romance genre, I then picked up a YA fantasy novel, more specifically The Queen of Nothing by Holly Black. I actually filmed an entire reading vlog of me reading this book, and I will link that up above if you want more of a play-by-play of my opinions and a more detailed kind of overview of my final thoughts. But I will just say here briefly that I absolutely loved it. I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. Granted, I do think this is the weakest book in the trilogy, and I think there was kind of a missed opportunity to just really expand on more with the characters and with the overall plot. It was definitely a short book, but I had tons of fun. It was a great read, and I just love Holly Black and everything she writes, so it was overall a really great experience. Now, in terms of graphic novels and manga, I did manage to pick up Death Note Volume 2, and I quickly read through that in one sitting. I'm gonna save most of my thoughts on Death Note for when I finally do finish the series. I think that will just be more productive. I will say that I gave the second volume 4 stars, and I really liked it. I feel like the plot is starting to pick up, and I'm feeling much more invested. We are definitely getting that sense of a cat-mouse chase. So far so good. And then the final 3 books that I read for the month of February were part of a video challenge. It's a new series that I started on my channel called Library Roulette, where I basically go into the library and select 3 books that I have never seen before, but I'm selecting them solely based off of their immediate availability, their cover, and the quick synopsis on the back. Once again, I will link that video up above if you want more detailed thoughts about each of the books. So the first book I read was The Heiresses by Sarah Shepard. This is an adult mystery or thriller, if you want to call it, though I personally did not find it very thrilling. This is the story of a very well-to-do rich family in New York, and there are suspecting that maybe someone is out there to kill off each of their family members, and so they're trying to figure out who the killer is. Overall, I just found it to be quite underwhelming, the overall plot, and finding out who the big murderer was just not. It just didn't evoke that much of an emotional response from me. Overall, it was kind of a disappointing read, but definitely a good learning experience. And the second book that I picked up was How to Hack a Heartbreak by Kristen Rockaway. This book totally took me on an emotional roller coaster. I couldn't stand it at first, and then I ended up really enjoying it. This is the story of a woman who works in a startup incubator, and she's pushed around a lot by all of the men that work in the tech industry. And she ends up on her free time developing this website where women can basically go on and get a cathartic release and list all of these men that treat them poorly on dating apps or send them unsolicited, inappropriate pictures. And this website, called Jerk Alert, goes viral overnight. It's a huge success, and the story is pretty much this woman trying to figure out what to do with all of that success. It's marketed as an adult romance novel, but truly, I don't think I would call it that. It really is just a coming-of-age story about a working woman in the tech industry. I loved the tech backdrop, and like I said in the beginning, it was kind of rough and a little aggressive, and I didn't really like it, but by the end, I loved it, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. And the final book that I picked up for the month of February was Pasadena by Sherry L. Smith. This is a YA thriller mystery. We are following the story of Jude, who receives the tragic news that her high school best friend Maggie was found dead in a swimming pool in her backyard in Pasadena. And family members and the police are all ruling it as either a suicide or an accident, but Jude knows Maggie really well. She knows that her friend kept a lot of secrets, and Jude is convinced that someone murdered Maggie. So the story is Jude spending a summer trying to find the answer. Personally, I don't know how I feel about this ending. It really wasn't what I was hoping for, but it is an interesting read. It's really short, so if you are looking to go to the beach and you want to read a thriller all in one sitting, this would be a perfect idea for you. It was alright, nothing too memorable, but it did evoke a lot of imagery of that Netflix show called You, if that kind of gives you an idea of what the tone is for this novel. So if it sounds like something that interests you, I think other people could really enjoy it. But otherwise, I ended up giving it a 3.5 star rating. Alright, you guys, that is going to do it for my February wrap up. Comment down below if you have any thoughts about the books I mentioned here today. Otherwise, I will catch you in the next one. Bye!